Hello, everyone, and welcome to PGCMLS's Community Conversations. My name is Carrie Gray. I am the Adult and Senior Services Specialist for Prince George's County Memorial Library System. I help facilitate the Books by Mail program. I also curate programming for adults and seniors for PGCMLS. Normally, our CEO, Roberta Phillips, leads the community conversation, but I will be stepping in today. Today's topic will be domestic violence, and I have special guest with us today, Tunde, but her full name is Omotunde, Tunde Sowole-West, and she will be joining us. And let me just give you a little bit of her bio for you today. Omotunde Tunde Sowole-West is the brains behind helping us grow sexually. Hugs. Tunde is a public health practitioner born and raised in Oakland, California, but has spent the majority of her career on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. Tunde has always been the go-to girl for answers to sexuality questions and was coined the sexpert among her family and friends at an early age. Tunde has over 15 years of experience as a content area specialist, clinical health center director, classroom teacher, program, and professional development. So has a great background. Tunde is passionate about empowering all people from various backgrounds about the wonderful world of sexual health. Tunde is the lead author of the Washington, D.C.'s 2015 Youth Risk Behavior Survey Report, which highlighted key health-related behavior data of youth and youth adults in D.C. Tunde has a bachelor's in biology from Howard University and a master's of public health from the Millikan Institute School of Public Health at the George Washington University. She has been featured on WUSA 9, Let's Talk Live News Channel 8, Prince George's County CTV, Bedroom Business by the Beacon Blog, WHUR The Frank Ski Show 96.3, WHUR He Said, She Said, WPGC 95.5, Consider This Radio Podcast, the Good News Radio Station, Girl Talk Radio Blog, and Maternal Mondays, DC's Maternal and Infant Health Initiative. Wow, what a great resume. And I know a couple of those shows. So, welcome on Tunde, or Tunde, I should say, rather.
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie Ann, for having me, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing in Prince George's County, because it's definitely important, especially now. I mean, in the midst of COVID and everything that is happening. So it's great that, I just really, as a Prince George's County resident, just really commend all of the amazing work that you're doing and your colleagues are doing to make sure that folks still get the resources that they deserve during such a crucial time.
Thank you. Thank you. No problem. That's what we're here for, is to give people, a lot of people think we're just books, but we're trying to reach out to everyone. We have tons of resources, and I love connecting with people in the community. And this is, before we get into the topic, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you find yourself in this world?
I know it's a question that is often asked. Like what makes you want to talk to people about sex education, and sexuality, and then the biggest thing is that it's so taboo, just in our culture and just in our society. And although we live in a very sexualized or kind of open society, it's still very taboo. As you stated, in my bio, I've always kind of been comfortable and the go-to person when it came to topics that surrounded sex. And I think a lot of times, we'll probably talk a little bit more about this in our conversation, but a lot of times when folks think about sex, they automatically think about just, the act itself. But it's so much more. So I have always been super interested in just how, the body works and anatomy and physiology. And just last year, although H.U.G.S, which is, it stands for Helping Us Grow Sexually, which of course, as you stated, is my baby. I started it last year, and just really to make sex a common and simple language among all. It doesn't matter your age or your stage in life. It's really important that we are talking about this topic, and of course, making sure that we're talking about, consent, healthy relationships, being important with talking about your body, what it means to be in an unhealthy relationship, and just a variety of different topics that fall into this category. So I started H.U.G.S with the intention of really making, again, sex a simple and common language among all, but then also, again, no matter your age or your stage in life, I really just want to make sure that folks feel connected when talking about this particular topic.
Wow, thanks. Thanks.
Sure,
So you started talking about hugs.
sure.
So tell me a little bit more about hugs and what's your goal and your objective with hugs? Like who are you trying to reach? And what kind of services do you provide?
Sure. So, as a public health practitioner, I've worked in many different sectors. As you stated, I've been an educator. I've worked in the nonprofit sector. I currently work in the government sector. Is just to really understand how all of these different systems work and to really combine those different sectors and really work with folks from different areas and really just bringing this topic to life. And bringing it to life, I mean, making it comfortable. I can't say that enough. And one word that you'll hear me say during this talk is communication. I'm a big advocate of communication, healthy communication, making sure that folks feel comfortable with talking about the topic. But really the goal, again, and the model for helping us grow sexually, or H.U.G.S, is making sex a simple and common language among all, regardless of your age and stage. So I work with parents, I work with youth, I work with single individuals, I work with couples, I work with schools, universities, faith-based communities, and really what makes H.U.G.S stand out among other companies or organizations, that I really tailor my message to the targeted audience. So I feel that sex education is not a one-size-fits-all kind of component. So we can't say, okay, how we taught this one community is the same way we're going to teach this community. How we teach this one individual is the same way that we're going to teach the next individual. You're not going to get your message across. So therefore, really working with folks from different sectors and really just tailoring the message in a way that is going to be understandable. Of course, making sure that the information is accurate, it's research, and it's scientific, and it's up to date. Because I think a lot of times, you know, I'll speak with our young folks in particular, because I mean, technology is everything, right? We're now in an age, especially now, right, during COVID. I mean, we're definitely having a virtual session here, so that's a technology piece, right? So everything is so accessible online or just through technology. So making sure that if we are going to have these, these modes of communication with folks, making sure that information is really accurate and up to date. And I say up to date because a lot of times when folks look up this information, it's outdated. It's not specific to the individual who's reading it. So really, H.U.G.S is here to really make sure. I pride myself on researching and reading articles. Sometimes my partner, he's like, what are you still doing? I'm like, well, I'm posting, information that's going to be critical for individuals who are reading it. So I really pride myself on making sure I stay up to date, not just, information that is pertinent here in the United States, but information that is global, because a lot of folks may not know that there's best practices that excuse me, are happening globally that could benefit us here in the States.
Oh, wow. Awesome and much needed resource. I know probably a couple of parents or teachers are like, oh, these are awkward conversations that need to happen, and especially now. And that
Sure.
kind of leads us to this topic. So everyone, since March, we've been dealing with this quarantine. People are staying home more. They're talking about people getting divorces, and I think there's friction on all levels with with being at home between families, mothers and their children, everybody dealing with this new way of life. And I've seen a lot of articles and a lot of news stories about domestic violence being on the rise. and even especially here in Prince George's County. So what can you walk us through, give us a definition on what is domestic violence, and what is the definition of domestic violence? What is it?
Sure. So domestic violence, Carrie-Ann, is in a nutshell, is any type of violence that could be defined as a pattern of unhealthy behavior. And it's really to gain power and control. In a nutshell, it's to gain power and control over an intimate partner. Point blank. When you hear those words, power and control, it's a domestic violence situation. A lot of times folks will hear the word intimate partner violence. So I just want to distinguish a little bit too. Domestic violence could happen between family members. Intimate partner violence, are also known as IPV, happens between an intimate partner. So two intimate partners are multiple intimate partners. So although they're used interchangeably, which is not, wrong all the way, but I do want folks to understand the difference. So really, again, that power and control, and that honestly, a lot of times starts in the beginning of a relationship. Folks may not really understand what that looks like, and we can talk and dig more into that, but it really starts small and sometimes can grow over time.
Oh, wow. That's the first time that I've heard the term intimate partner violence. And when I think of domestic violence, I usually think of man and woman fighting, in the house. But to put that whole family, spin on, I think makes it, broadens it up,
Sure.
makes it a little real. And let's talk about this. There's a difference between, I guess, emotional abuse, physical violence. How does that all play into domestic violence?
Sure. So there are different, to your point, there's that physical component of domestic violence, but then there's also that psychological. And psychological is a little bit broader, right? Because you have your emotional, your mental abuse that all kind of falls in under that kind of psychological domestic violence. And honestly, that psychological one sometimes is often hard for folks to really pinpoint versus for physical abuse, right? Or physical domestic violence, because with physical domestic violence, sometimes there's evidence, right? But with that kind of psychological, emotional, or mental abuse, it's often hard sometimes for folks to really distinguish that. So when you talk about emotional abuse, I'll use a term. Actually, I posted about this. I think it was a couple of weeks ago on my Instagram page, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But gaslighting. This is a type of emotional abuse, and this term actually it came from a movie. I think it's like the late 30s, early 40s, and it basically was about a couple, and it was about a husband and a wife, and this husband basically was emotionally abusing his wife. And he would basically make her feel that she was going crazy. He was manipulating her. So what he would do is he would turn down the lights and dim them to make her think that it was getting darker. And he would say, no, it's not getting darker. So she started to believe in her mind that, wait, am I wrong? That's emotional abuse. To really make folks to think that victim, to make them think that they're really questioning their every thoughts, their memories, and every kind of every move that they make. That's emotional abuse, and oftentimes that's really hard to trace, right? So when we think about emotional abuse, we really have to teeter lightly, because a lot of times, especially folks who have gone through kind of that gaslighting that I just talked about, they'll say, no, I'm okay, because they've been manipulated so much that they start to think, well, am I okay? I think I'm okay because my partner, the abuser or the perpetrator, has told me that I'm okay. So, we really have to start to think outside of the box when we think about domestic violence. Because I think a lot of times when folks think domestic violence, they automatically go to the physical component. And although that's a very important piece, we want to also consider there are other different types of abuse.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because I think initially I can hear like somebody saying, well, he doesn't beat me. I'm not being abused. I'm not in a abusive relationship. What are some signs, I guess, can you give some more? Like that's so interesting to me, the whole gaslighting. And it's like a mental, it seems like a lot of mental manipulation, mental mind games people play. How do we watch out? Because I think we dwell on physical, and I think physical, you kind of, everybody has an understanding of physical, but give me some more details about emotional abuse and what do we look for, like if we're starting a relationship or even if we're in a relationship.
Sure. So if you are in a relationship that you feel like, this may be emotional or mental abuse, and if you know, for example, if you're someone, I'll start with someone who may be very confident, outgoing, to get in a relationship, they're certain of themselves, they're outgoing, or they may not even be outgoing, right? But they are a sounded person. I like to say they're a grounded person, for lack of better terms, right? But then often decisions start to be kind of, their decision making becomes a little teetered, or they're someone who used to be able to make decisions kind of right away, but now they're questioning their decisions, because what happens is, again, like I stated, power and control, right? That's domestic violence. It's that power and control. When one person has gained power, they gain control, and they start little by little, it begins kind of with that toxic communication, right? No, you're I never said that. I never said that, we were going to go there. But the other day we just talked about going to the movies. You told me we are going to go to the movies, but the person, or like I said, the perpetrator or the abuser makes you feel that none of this has occurred. So really starting I like to, when I work with individuals who are in unhealthy relationships, I tell them to start writing things down. That's a tip. I will say that, write things down. So by you writing them down, by you putting these components in your cell phone, whatever the case may be, you have some documentation for yourself, like, no, this actually occurred. Because a lot of times, that emotional abuse, like you said, it's hard to really pinpoint, because I mean, let's be real. Like, even for me, sometimes it's hard for me to remember what I did yesterday. So what I wore yesterday. So someone who is in an emotional abuse and they have so many things going on, and now of course we're in the midst of COVID and all these, things that are happening in life, you start to believe the perpetrator or the abuser, this person who you love, no, they're not lying to me. Maybe I'm the one who is mixing things up. So really looking, really being an advocate for yourself and making sure, the biggest tip I can give is documenting everything, whether it be putting things in your calendar, writing things down, in a note, of course, out of the perpetrator or the abuser's site, because you really need to compare and know for yourself that you are not crazy. You are a victim of emotional abuse.
Wow. So you have me writing stuff down and taking notes too, because I think that is good. And kind of go back to the stuff, and you mentioned it again, that power and control. I don't think I necessarily associated with that, with domestic violence. But now that you're talking about it, I think I do understand that a little bit better. So how do you know when your relationship is unhealthy? Like,
Yeah.
what are some of the signs or of an unhealthy relationship? And or maybe you want to discuss like a healthy relationship looks like this, because some people don't know, and sometimes things are passed down from generation. It's accepted as a norm or a cultural norm or whatever like that. But give us kind of like your definition of, I guess, both unhealthy and healthy.
Sure. So I'll start with the negative and end with the positive. I like let's do it that way. So with the unhealthy relationship, I like to tell folks, in an unhealthy relationship, things just don't fall in line. Because in a healthy relationship, things kind of just, they work as a puzzle, right? Of course there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be, bumpy roads or trial and error, but generally you and that individual, you kind of come together and say, okay, let's make decisions together. Problems will arise, but again, let's make decisions together. And you generally love being in the company of that individual, right? So really looking at unhealthy relationships, there's that toxic communication. And I think a lot of times too, folks, they think about domestic violence and they automatically say, uh, oh, the yelling. Yes, that is, but it really doesn't always start with yelling. It could just simply, again, that power and control, toxic communication, making someone feel that they're not worthy, that they're, they don't know what they're talking about, right? Then there's the jealousy component. Someone always, now of course, there we like to kind of say, oh, we want to be jealous a little bit of our partner because it makes it kind of happy and it makes it kind of fun, right? But I'm talking about jealousy to the point where you don't want your partner speaking to anyone, right? Regardless of what gender that individual, because there's always a suspicion that that individual may be trying to do X, Y, and Z, right? And then of course, one thing that I also want to talk about too is kind of that financial, like negative financial behaviors. Someone controlling the money, someone making every single decision without consulting, your partner. And then this is a really, really big one, which is isolation. And this is what we're seeing now in COVID. But even prior to COVID, folks who are in domestic violence or unhealthy relationships, they're isolated from their loved ones. They start to slowly back away because one, the victim doesn't want, and the victim knows, okay, a little bit slowly but surely in the back of their head that they're in an unhealthy relationship, and they don't want to be called out on it. So they start to kind of tear away from those who love them and who care about them. And I can touch a little bit on why it's important to support individuals in a very delicate way who may be in a domestic violence situation, but really isolating themselves from healthy relationships, because healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships, there's an unequal balance there, right? So when you have someone who has a loving family member, a loving friend who cares about that individual who's in an unhealthy relationship, they're going to call them out on that because they want them to be happy. They want them to be healthy. So that individual to start to isolate themselves in a way so that they're like, well, I'm happy, but I need to back away from those who may be seeing this unhealthy relationship. And then the way I really like to coin kind of healthy relationships, and I do a workshop on this. It's called the 3 C's: consent, communication, and consistency. And the reason why I say those 3 C's is because consent, there's this understanding between both parties or understanding between those in the relationship. So consenting on whatever, and I think a lot of people think when people think about consent, they think about the sexual aspect. And yes, there is a component of that, but more so of consent on any ground, consenting to, yes, having sex, consenting to, going to the movies together, and not someone having that power and control, okay? And then there's that communication piece, making sure that you're having healthy dialogues, right, about whatever the case may be, whether it is, what are we gonna have for dinner, or where are we gonna go to hang out? And then consistency, like I stated before, there may be some trial and error, some bumps in the road in any healthy relationships, but generally there is a consistent flow between the individuals who are both in those relationships, who are in that relationship, and there's an understanding. So consistency, that really kind of is understanding between those individuals. And when I do this workshop, I really dig deep into each of those 3s because it's really important to understand those 3 and how they can really make a relationship work.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. Thank you. You gave us some good, I like that, the 3 C's. You talked about the jealousy, the controlling, the money, the isolation. So we kind of identified the bad and we identified what a healthy should be.
Yes.
So here's a question for you. How do I know if I can stay in a relationship or if we can get help for the relationship? Because a lot of people might not know, like, is this, because I know we throw around the word, I feel like toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I know, like, no, I'm in a bad, I need to be out, or no, I think we need to go to counseling. Like, I think we can work on this. Like, how do I need to know, like, for myself, like, okay, I got to go.
Yeah, no, that's a very great question. Communication, right? If you can communicate with your partner about how you feel, and there is no, and of course, and this is one of the things I talk about in the 3 C's course, understanding that your partner is not going to make you feel bad about how you feel. Communication, right? Hey, hon, I feel like we're kind of hitting a rough patch. I think there needs to be some counseling, or I think we need to have a neutral party come in to really help us work through these. And there's no power. Again, I go back to that power and control, and that individual in that relationship isn't making that other individual feel that there's nothing wrong. Communication and making sure that you're having that dialogue, making sure you're having that consistent dialogue so that you all are on the same page. When you automatically, I think, because sometimes, folks say, oh, once, my partner hits me, that's it, I'm out. You really have to know and understand that, and I tell folks this all the time, no one should hit anyone. No one should be putting their hands on anyone. That physical abuse is just a no-no. Emotional abuse is a no-no too, but that physical abuse, that's a different level of anger that now has been turned on, right? So like I tell folks, if someone feels they have to hit you or put their hands on you, there's a level of anger, one, that they need to address. And if they're not willing to get that counseling, you have to, as an individual, start to consider kind of making a plan, which I can talk about a little bit more, making a plan to exit. And same with emotional abuse too, but I like to bring up the physical, because physical can bring a quicker detriment to one's health than emotional abuse sometimes can. Not all the time, but most of the time. But making sure that that individual in that relationship understand they need to have a plan to exit if a physical component happens. And I can talk about something, if I may, that I was just so happy about here in Maryland not too long ago. In Prince George's County, the strangulation law was just passed. And I was super happy about that, where our state attorney, Aisha Braveboy, helped pass this law where it was really hard to prosecute, where individuals really, it was hard for folks. Strangulation, what I will say is it was hard to bring to court or to try. And that the reason for that is because it was hard to pinpoint the evidence. Now there is, in Prince George's County, there's a new forensics tool that actually helps identify strangulation if one has been strangled. Again, that physical component is a very touchy one, but folks need to know that it's one that can be end up fatal. So we really have to have folks know that if you are in a relationship that is physical, start to make a plan. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen over a week, maybe not even, a few months, but start to make a plan, because it could be fatal.
Okay. So you talked a lot about making a plan. Um, what does that look like in the regards of, like, you talking about somebody might have that finances control? I don't have the money. I don't have the means to take care of my kids. I'm kind of locked into this situation. It's COVID. It's a pandemic going on. I just can't run out my house. What does a plan look like for someone who needs to leave? Like, I know I need to leave. What does that look like?
Sure, great question. So really having one, I will say this, having a trusted individual in your corner. a trusted individual that you can confide to, that you can talk to, who could really help you during this very emotional time in your life, right? And the reason why I say that is because that person is going to be your kind of safety net to help you get out, whether that be someone from a crisis center, whether that be a family member, of course, someone who that victim could really, that really feels close to and has built a relationship or a bond with, where they can trust. And that is key, right? Uh, it's really, to your point, just as you were asking the question, it is really sad because a lot of folks do say that, well, you know, this is all I know, and this is a pandemic, and this individual is helping me take care of my children. But if you're no longer here, is my question, right? Of course, this is not a question that you were proposed right away, but if you're no longer here, and I want someone to really think about that, who is going to take care of your children? Right? So making sure that you stay physically healthy. And what does that mean? Start to make a plan. So if that means, calling the crisis center, and I can talk about resources that are here in Prince George's County, because there are a variety of, amazing resources here, but really making sure that you connect with different folks so that you can get the help that you need. Because again, if you aren't here, and not just the physical component that I talked about in terms of domestic violence, emotional abuse can also be fatal over time, right? Because if someone feels that they're not valued, then suicide, which is a whole nother topic within itself, becomes a play. So really making sure that individuals feel that they have someone to talk to build out a plan, and make an escape. Because a lot of domestic violence cases, there is a potential to escape. It's not going to be the prettiest kind of escape route, but you got to go. You have to leave, whether it be, and I think sometimes folks think, well, I have this beautiful setup, and I have all of this, here, although, I may be getting abused, but again, if you aren't physically or mentally healthy, why stay? And a lot of folks, they don't want to stay, but they just don't know. Again, to your question, Karen, they don't know how to. So really building out a plan and then making sure you stick with that plan. I think a lot of times, just with any plan, we haven't mapped out, but when it comes time to actually tackle it, it gets scary, right? It's like kind of when you're like, yes, I'm gonna, and this is just very, very different scenario, but I'm gonna go skydiving. You build out a plan. I'm gonna book the skydiving place. I'm gonna buy the skydiving material or rent it. I'm gonna, look at it on YouTube. You build out this beautiful plan, but when it comes time to jump, you're like, no, I can't do it. You build out a plan, but you can't do it because of fear, right? And there's other reasons why folks don't leave, but because of fear, right, is a huge one. So again, making sure you know your resources, and there are tons of resources.
I want to, I don't want to just put it on, I feel like women, a lot of times, we always say, I don't want it to seem like we're men bashing and only um, men can abuse women. But I guess like play fighting. I done got upset and I done laid hands on him. Like, you know, any tips for, I guess, that are more general about abuse, and even if we are the abuser, like what are the signs? Like I need some help, or I need to. What are some of those things? If you can provide us any background on that or tips that can be applied to that.
Sure. So what I'm hearing you ask the question is more so around men who may be in a domestic violence situation as well too, right? So let me tell you this right here. statistically speaking, and this is information for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will experience sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. So I'll say that again: 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men, and the 1 in 10 men may be actually underreported, right? Because there's a stigma that, oh, you know, if my partner hits me, or if my you know, my wife hits me, or if my girlfriend hits me, or the case may be, or if my boyfriend hits me, it's no big deal. And I'll say this, I'll use a perfect example. I was doing a kind of one-on-one session, how we're doing here, and I was talking to a individual, and they basically said, you know, if my partner hits me, it's just going to be looked at as, oh, it's just 2 men. But it's violence. Regardless of how you cut it, it's violence, right? So
good.
1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will experience that, right? And then I say that too is because oftentimes we don't we really kind of exclude, or we kind of, the information that is available around our LGBTQ plus individuals is not discussed, and that's a huge component, because domestic violence also happens in our vulnerable populations as well too, right? And then another thing too, another CDC statistic is that there's 43 million, and about 38 million men have experienced some type of psychological aggression. So think about that. We're not now, we're moving away from the physical component, but now I'm kind of moving into that psychological aggression that we discussed. And I will say this as well too, as someone who has put together the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, or the YRBS, which also comes out of the CDC, 1 in 12 young people have experienced some type of physical dating violence. Okay, 1 in 12.
Wow. Wow.
So I mean, we really want to think about these implications that are targeting different populations. So yes, I think we say domestic violence, and as to your point, Ann, folks automatically think a woman, they get this picture in their head that there's this woman who's abused, but you really need to think about it where it's a woman, it's a man, you know, it's a trans woman, trans man, a young person, whoever the case may be, who is being physically or psychologically abused, and really start to think kind of outside the box, so that we're, you know, really capturing the data that needs to be captured to help these individuals.
Yeah, that's good stuff, because I'm guilty of that. I think if automatically my mind wanders to that, it's like a woman, but definitely it's sadly inclusive of everyone in all of these communities. And you provide a great transition. You talked about dating, like people new to being in relationships, our teens, our young people, and everything else like that. Like that's a whole never spin. How do parents, what are tips for parents to talking about healthy relationships with their children? I guess when, you know, they're, and I don't want to say they're of dating of age, because sometimes people, parents might say, oh, you can't date to this age, but that doesn't mean that they're in a relationship or talking to someone now. But what kind of tips do you have for parents for going into the conversation? Where should they start at? How do they bring this up?
Sure. So one thing is start early. That is something that I definitely want to say, is start early.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask. I was like, what age do you say?
Let me say this. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. We talk about consent. We talk about communication. We talk about healthy relationship. We talk about anatomy, and I do courses on this as well too. Okay. Again, to my point, no matter of your age or stage in life, it's important. This is sex education. This is a component of it, right? So I think we need to move away from that as well too. As I stated earlier in the beginning of our talk, is that people automatically, they hear sex education, they're like, oh, so you're going to be talking about, you know, penis and the vulva, penis and vagina. No, let's talk about healthy relationships. Let's talk about communication, right? So to your question, what are some tips for parents who are working with their teens, right? A lot of times folks are like, oh, teens, those are fun years. Those are those years that it's like, Urgh. But for our parents, I really want to say, I said start early, because when you start early, it really helps, I feel, bridge that continuum along the way. But modeling is important. Modeling healthy relationships are important, right? When you model a healthy relationship, I will say this, and this is one thing that I teach when I do this course, is action speaks louder than words. Because I can say, no, I'm not going to yell at Carrie Ann, but then go yell at you. And then it's like, well, wait, those are two conflicting messages. Versus me having this conversation with you. And yes, I may be angry with you, but I'm going to talk to you in a way that lets you know I'm angry, but show, let's have a healthy conversation. Let's communicate in a way that makes the most sense, so that I'm modeling to the young people who are watching, because young people watch and they take tips. And although they may, even our teens, we know that. And I told my teen parents and my adolescent parents, your teen may not be listening at that moment, but trust and believe, you are your child's first teacher. You're your child's first teacher. So they may not be taking all of that information in now. And I say that as a parent of two young ones, because me and my partner, we always are very shocked when our boys will basically repeat something that we said a few days ago. We're like, how did they remember that? And they're able to kind of regurgitate it in a way we're just like, whoa. Children are smart. Young people are very smart. So making sure that you're modeling it. Another tip is that if you're creating this relationship, as you create this relationship with your young people, making sure that once you've created that healthy relationship, if they confide to you, or they come to you with something that is, detrimental, or that may be upsetting to you, and you're in your mind, you may be screaming and you want to pull your hair out, be calm. Stay calm. And I know that's easier said than done, but stay calm, because you want your young person to be able to come back to you when something else happens, right? So young person may come to you and say, you know what, I kissed such and such, or I kissed this person. And you're just like, literally, you're sweating, you're ready to go off the handle. Swallow and talk to that individual. Talk to your young person. How does that make you feel? By you communicating in a way, and I know parents are like, oh, that's not going to work. I just want to, slap them across the head because they shouldn't be kissing at this age. Let me tell you this. Yes, we're in COVID. It's a little bit different now, but your children, just like we spend more time at work than we do sometimes with our young ones, your children spend more time at school than they do at home. So if they don't feel like they can come to you and communicate, who do you think they're going to get that information from?
Right.
Other young people or online. So therefore, helping build that relationship so that they feel comfortable talking to you. And then one of the other tips I will give is do not bash your young person. Don't bash them on the decisions that, and again, I know it's easier said than done, because even sometimes when my 5-year-old does stuff, I'm like, what would make you do that? Why would you do that? And I have to catch myself like, okay, you know what? Calm down. No one's bleeding. No one's lost a limb. Let's talk about it. And then really have a healthy conversation, because that way, then they'll be able to feel comfortable talking to you about those things that they really would need to talk to you about. And that even goes well into adult years, where they'll be able to, you'll be that safety, or that safe adult that I talked about, or that trusted adult that I talked about earlier. If they do get into unhealthy relationships and they don't have anyone to turn to, I can turn to my parent, I can turn to my guardian, who's my safety net, and really talk to them about this situation that I'm in.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Now, you talked about, you said you have a 2 and a 5-year-old? Okay. So you talk about that. I think about back to my childhood, and I remember they used to do this whole good touch, bad touch. So for the young kids, real younger than like teenage, how do we start to have that conversation or say things? Just give us a couple of little tips for that. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So I also do a workshop on that as well with my parents who are have children who are 10 and under. And really, it really stems from the parents being comfortable with who they are. I have parents who they don't feel comfortable saying the word penis or vulva without laughing, without feeling uncomfortable, without saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that out in public." By you creating that uncomfortable kind of environment, creates that uncomfortable environment for your young person. And I say this, and I always use this story, and it's very true, and it stands true. My 5 and 2-year-old both. I have two boys. They both know the difference between a penis and a vulva, with no laughter. There, we don't call it anything else. We are a very sex positive family. We talk about body parts in a healthy way. Why? Because just like you talk about your hand, you talk about your hair, you talk about your lips. We have to start to create comfortable environments around our body parts. To your point, Carrie Ann, you were taught the good touch versus bad touch, right? What does that look like? My two boys, they know, like, no one is supposed to touch my penis. We're in the bathtub, you're washing me. I'll give them the washcloth and say, hey, go ahead and wash your penis. They know where to go. They don't go anywhere else. Confusing kids, and there are parents, and to no guilt of anyone, because of course culture and tradition, there's so many things that play into it. That's a whole nother topic within itself. But there are folks who were taught to call their body parts different things. So we don't say penis, we don't say vagina, we don't say vulva, we don't say any of those things.
That's
No,
my mom.
it was
Not to
mine
out,
too.
but
No,
yeah,
it's
not to
mine
out
too.
my mom, but I think it just comes from the fact that I don't want you to go out and be like penis, 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 like
Right.
or whatever. So you might call it different names or give it a little fluffy name. So it's good to hear. I think this is very progressive, and I like the terminology, and I've heard this a lot. Sex positive. So I appreciate this. I believe you're helping somebody
No,
out
but you know
there.
what? I appreciate that, but it's mine too. And like you said, not to. I mean, I grew up in a very loving family, but it was just like, oh no, we don't. Because even to now, my mom, amazing. She lives with us. I love it. She's so helpful. It's just like, how did you even get into being so comfortable with all of this? And again, it's just me being. I've always been this way. I've always been super comfortable with just body and understanding, like just scientists in the making, I guess, right? But it's really having those early conversations that are key, right? There's so many books out there. I mean, I have a library of books, that I refer to families, and there's so many that I actually share when I do workshops, and I recommend from colleagues that I work with, from other sex positive people, other sex educators that have just put together some great resources and authors that I share with parents. And storytelling is super important with our young people, right? Because a lot of times, young people, they want you to read to them, or story time, or what does that look like? So books, I mean, I'm speaking to the right audience here, right? Because I'm speaking to the Prince George's County Memorial Library Service, right? So it's really making sure that our young people, and again, there's so many great resources. I'm actually in the spring of 2021, H.U.G.S will be launching a page on my website that I'll talk about in a bit, that's going to list resources for parents at different stages. So regardless if you're a parent of an infant, or if you're a parent of a teen, or if you're 65 years old, there are so many different books that are available that talk about this sex education, sexuality, in a way that is helpful. I mean, things from consent to healthy relationships, to body parts, to intimacy, you name it. So we're putting that together. That will be launched in the spring. So we're excited about that.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good. Thank you. So I
sure.
think we want to move it to adults. Can you give us, we talked about the itty bitties, we talked about the teens. Now let's go into adults. How do we really advocate or help someone who may be dealing with a domestic violence situation?
Sure. So the first thing I want to point out is that if there's someone who you may expect is in a domestic violence situation, whether it be physical or psychological, understand that that person may want to leave. And I mentioned this earlier, but they may not know how to. They may want to leave, but they have no clue. And then you are that safe haven or that safe net for them. Really start to have an open, dialogue with that individual. Just regular conversation about the relationship. Read between the lines. Sometimes and I will say this, a lot of times folks are telling you information in a very coded way. And what does that look like? Sometimes, it's like, oh God, I don't want to go home. I just want to stay out, and of course, knowing that party or knowing that individual kind of start to listen to that, really listen to that. What does that really mean? And just kind of monitor it and just really understand what that individual is saying. And then start to look up resources for that individual because they may not have the ability to because they may be living with their perpetrator or their abuser. um, and then also another thing is don't down talk the victim because they're already getting enough of that in the relationship. They're already getting enough of that abuse in the relationship. I think oftentimes we want to just shake the person because we love them and we care about them. We want to say, just get out. This person doesn't love you. They don't care about you. They're abusing you. And to you, from the person who is on the outside looking in, it's easy to see that. But when you're in it, you may not be able to see that. So really understanding, not bashing that individual or not down talking that individual who really wants to help, but they may not understand what that means because you may be that person who will help them build that plan to escape that I talked about earlier. So really being there for them, right? And making sure that they are safe. Now I know that's a heavy dish to lift, but if there's someone again who who is in an unhealthy relationship, seeking the resources for them and start to slowly say, hey, well, I know there's this event that is happening that and just sometimes you can do it just very indirectly. That's to support women who may be in um, an unhealthy relationship. Now that wouldn't be the first thing that you would put in that individual, but over time, so that you can sneak things in little by little.
Good stuff. I like that last little bit, kind of like maybe introduce it and with us
Yeah.
saying but not saying, and then maybe if you continue to see it, you know, kind of step it up and have more of a direct approach.
Right.
Thank you. I think that's really good. So, what are some resources in Prince George's County or Maryland that are good to know or good to kind of give someone?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely, what I will say is that, and it's just crazy, is that we're in a pandemic and we don't know how long we're going to be in this. And of course, we have elections next week. So there's so many things that are just happening in society. And I will say this is that uh, during the pandemic, Prince George's County unfortunately has seen a 10% increase of domestic violence criminal cases. So again, to my point, we don't know how long we're going to be in this pandemic. And unfortunately, if we are not helping these individuals, we will probably see an increase, right? So making sure that anyone who is watching this, any providers who work with folks in any population, whether it be if you are a clinician or you're an educator, looking for certain signs to really help victims of domestic violence. First, I will say if someone is in immediate danger, the first thing to do is call 911. If you're in an immediate danger,
Right.
because it can become fatal very quickly. Another resource, I'll kind of go broadly and then I'll bring it down to our county here. So there's a national domestic violence hotline, and it's 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. And all these are easily accessible. The one thing I like about the National Domestic Violence Hotline is, and a lot of domestic violence hotlines or websites, is that when you go onto their website, if you need to, they tell you how to kind of exit out quickly if needed. So if there's someone who is watching this again and you need assistance, make a plan, and that is part of your plan. In Maryland, there is a Maryland crisis hotline for folks if they need it. It's 1-800-422-0009. Once again, it's the Maryland crisis hotline, and that's 1-800-422-0009. And then coming here to Prince George's County, there is a domestic violence sexual assault center at the University of Maryland Prince George's County Hospital. And what they do is they really work to advocate for victims of domestic violence, and just making sure that they have the resources that are needed to get them through this unfortunate event in their life. And then again, like I stated earlier, is that I was super excited that Maryland and our county was able to change the law and making strangulation a first-degree felony, which is huge because, again, it's something that was really unseen. But being able to have this forensic tool to detect the evidence of strangulation was key. And then the last thing that I really want to pinpoint, look for the different domestic violence resources in your faith-based community. For those who may be a part of any faith-based community, it could be if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're Buddhist, there may be a resource in your faith-based community that will really help pinpoint some resources for you. I know Prince George's County in the past has had an interfaith conference around domestic violence that brought together different leaders, clergy leaders, to really talk about the importance of recognizing signs of domestic violence. So if you are part of a faith-based community, looking to see what resources are for you. So just really understanding that. So those are just some of the kind of higher level ones. There's many different shelters that are available for victims of the domestic violence in Prince George's County. I won't go down the list of those. However, if you're interested in information, folks can reach out to me at my website. My website is www.helpingusgrowsexually.com. And then I know if folks have additional questions, that I do free educational resources. I provide free educational resources as well as education on my Instagram page, where I kind of launched H.U.G.S, and that's at Helping Us Grow Sexually. So if folks, have questions, they need a little bit more information about resources, they can look there, they can DM me and email me. But again, check me out on my website and my Instagram, and that is where you can best find me.
Awesome, awesome. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, you're welcome to call the library if you don't have access to someone to do kind of those searches for you. You're welcome to call one of the libraries, and we will be glad to look into some resources for you. We also on our website, www.pgcmls.info, have guides and links to resources for mental health and several of the different things that she's mentioned. So please see us online or give us a call. Also, Tunde talked about books. You can go into our catalog and you can type in domestic violence, relationships, if you want to do some reading on that, or if you want to share with your teen or your parent, or you want to share with your teen or adult or anyone, you can refer them to those resources. So any final thoughts, and if you can share again with us just your handle so that they can find you on your Instagram. I know you do a couple of lives and things that might be of interest, and I've browsed and I'm following you too on Instagram now, and I know you encompass everything. I know we focused on domestic violence today, but she does everything from sexual health and everything else like that. But if you have any final thoughts, and if you could just go ahead and provide us with your social media information.
Sure. So again, my social media, my Instagram is at helping us grow sexually. And if you go there, I literally post daily, sometimes twice daily, information. If there's a topic that you would like for me to discuss, folks DM me. They say, hey, could you do a topic about gaslighting? Or could you do a topic about Brazilian waxes and how is it healthy to the vulva? And although I may not do it that particular day because I want to, make sure that I'm getting the most updated and accurate information. So I do research before I put together that blog that you see there on my Instagram page. So please check me out. And then each month, I've started a series started in August called the Sexy Mind series. And basically what that is really to bridge the gap between sexual and mental health, because both sexual and mental health has been super taboo and still super taboo, but they're very important topics that we should be talking about. And what I do is I talk about those two components, sexual and mental health, in different populations. So for example, the month before last, September was my golden resting month. So I took a break from it, but we're starting back again this Friday. But in August, I talked to a clergy leader in the Christian community and talking about why sexual and mental health is important to talk about in that space. So this Friday coming up, I'm actually speaking with a director from Pennsylvania who oversees the LGBTQ plus persons, more specifically persons of color, to really touch on the importance of sexual and mental health in that population. So the goal is really to touch on the importance of these topics in these different populations, so that we can again make sex a simple and common language among all. If you're interested in having a workshop, come to you. Right now, everything is virtual until we open back up. Please reach out to me at my website, www.helpingusgrowsexually.com. Once again, that's www.helpingusgrowsexually.com. And reach out to me. There's a contact me box there, but I have, some of the workshops that I've done and some of the publications that I've put out that will be helpful for you and your family, your providers, etc.
Thank you so much, Tunde, for taking the time out to talk with us about this topic. I didn't think I was an expert. I learned so much. So I thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us. I thank everyone for tuning in. Please check out our resources that are available on our website at pgcmls.info. Please check us out, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.